We are live. We are live.
Okay. So, broadcast.
Say.
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين بالقاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على ثم الصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين أما بعد صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. Mu'mineen, mu'minat, brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman, salamun alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We continue with our tafsir of Surah Al-Falaq. Last night we went through the ayat وَمِن شَرِّ غَاسِقٍ إِذَا وَقَبْ, that we are seeking protection from the darkness when it envelops and covers. And we talked about the idea of darkness and how darkness and evil are kind of connected, that in a way, at least in a few ways, where individuals who want to perform evil or do something evil usually wait for the cover of night, the cover of darkness, to do what they have to do. And individuals who we call good usually are more susceptible and more vulnerable at night as well. And we talked about how the series of the ayat, that Allah starts by mentioning that we should be seeking refuge and protection through Him in general from everything that has been created. And then Allah gives these three specific things, starting with the idea of evil that takes place in the darkness, and then afterwards mentions two other specific ones, most likely and possibly, according to Mufassirin, because of the importance that it has during that time and possibly during our time as well. So obviously those three things are the darkness of evil, right? The evil that takes place at night. The second is magic, which we'll talk about a little bit tonight, although we talked about a little bit last night as well. And then the third and final ayah talks about hasad and jealousy. And what's interesting is that there's a common element through all of these, and if we have time at the end of tonight, we'll try to tie all that together. And the other ayah that we mentioned, the second to last ayah, وَمِن شَرِّ النَّفَّاثَاتِ فِي الْعُقَدِ, right? And we're also seeking refuge from the evil of nafathat, which we said literally means female witch or female practitioners of magic or sorceresses, fil uqad, meaning those who are blowing on knots, because that was the form of witchcraft that was practiced back then. They would recite certain incantations, certain spells, and then they would blow on knots, right, to kind of seal the spell. That's how it worked. So we had a few initial questions that we started to talk about last night. The first is this. So nafathat literally means female, right, witches, right, or sorceresses. Obviously, witches or practitioners of magic can also be male, right? Usually the word uses sorcerer, which technically can go either way. It could be male or female. But over here, Allah specifically mentioning female. Now, in the Quran, pretty much every other time where magic is mentioned, it's regarding males, right? It was male practitioners of magic or male sorcerers that went toe-to-toe with Nabi Musa alayhi salam, for example, right? In the story of Nabi Sulaiman, it was mostly males that were engaging him, right? And that were, conjuring and trying to take control of jinn and use their abilities. So that's typically what we have. So this instance in the Quran is only addressing females. So, okay, the question is, why them only? If males also engage in magic, right, a sorcerer, then why this, right? There's a few different reasons that have been mentioned. One is that in general, women used to practice, and I don't think we have to say used to, I think we could say is still the case today, that magic is primarily, and witchcraft is primarily associated with women and not with men, right? When you think of magic and witchcraft, even the word witch itself, normally when we hear the word witch, right, what comes in your mind? Even that caricature in Western literature, right? Or it's with the broom and that pointy hat, right? It's females, right? It's females around that cauldron. That's the general idea. Salem, Massachusetts, same sort of idea, right? It was females that were being called out. So in history, generally speaking, it was females who were engaging more in witchcraft than males were. Not to say males didn't engage, but females were engaging more, and this is perhaps one of the reasons why they were being called out in the Quran, because they were the ones engaging in the practice of magic at the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wa alihi wasallam. They were engaging in that practice more than men were at that time. So this is one interpretation. Another is that although the literal interpretation solves it and answers the question to some degree, there's another metaphorical or allegorical and deeper response that some of the mufassirin extract as well. They say this idea of blowing on knots has one, zahir, a literal interpretation, and then there's a batini and a deeper ta'wil and tafsir as well. And they say this has to do with what? Right? When we think about magic and spells and incantations and all of this, it has to do with having an effect and having this profound influence on somebody, so much so, it's as if their free will is gone. Right? That's the idea of how a spell works. Right? When people think about love spells, now if somebody falls in love and it's outside of their free will. Or somebody gets angry with somebody outside of their free will. That's what we think about when it comes to magic and spells. So in general, right? And again, I don't want to be canceled after saying this. I'm just giving you what the mufassirin are saying. That this same ability, even outside of the realm of magic, just in normal day-to-day conversation, the ability to persuade, the ability to influence, the ability to pressure and change opinions, which way does it normally go? Do men affect women's opinions or do women affect men's opinions? Generally, not all the time. Usually, it's women that affect men, right? Through influence, pressure, and persuading. And it can happen in a positive and negative way, obviously. But in Islamic history, there are many, many stories that are told of specific women who are called out because of the influence, the negative influence that they had within their families or on other individuals, right? Many of them that we can talk about. So one of them, since inshallah, next week we will be commemorating the Shahada of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wassalam. Just to give you some background for those who may not understand and know the history. We know that there was this person, Ibn Muljam, na'atullah alayh, who was the actual assassin who had struck Amir al-Mu'mineen in Salah when he was in, according to some riwayat, in sujood, right? So why did this person, Ibn Muljam, this Khariji, why did he go and do this in the first place? Just because he hated Amir al-Mu'mineen? No, he actually did not want to do this in the first place. He was not interested in assassinating and making Imam Ali alayhi salam shaheed. So how did this happen? He fell in love with somebody. That's what happened. He fell in love with somebody named Qattam bint Shajna. So she was known as the most beautiful woman in Kufa. Right? That's what the riwayat mentioned. And she had this hatred of Imam Ali, an intense hatred. And when Ibn Muljam first laid eyes on her, right, he tried to court her and she decided to use her powers, her suggestive influence on him, right? So she would be encouraging him and persuading him that, why don't you just go kill Ali, right? I hate him, you hate him, we all hate him, just kill him, get it over with. That wasn't working. He saw that she saw that he was constantly pursuing her, so he decided, let me use that too. He said, fine, I know that you want to propose to me, you want to marry me. Fine, but I have a condition. My condition is the head of Ali ibn Abi Talib. She made a condition for him to get married to her that he, Ibn Muljam, goes out and kills Amir al-Mu'mineen. Even then, he said, I still don't know if I can do this. I don't even know how to do this. I've never done something like this before. Even if I did want to do it, I would need help. He said, okay, no problem, I can help you. She went and found somebody specifically to go and help him plan and execute this. So she's been there from the beginning to encourage, to persuade. She made it a condition of her marriage, and then she actually offered somebody up to go and help him commit this planning for the assassination. All of this was because of that love for that individual, right? This individual. We have other stories as well, right? In the Quran, in riwayat. Another famous story that most of us remember and know is the women of Kufa. Right? When Muslim ibn Aqil alayhi salam is in Kufa, when he starts to build up a sizable, large following, people are ready to support him, to go and fight against Ibn Ziyad, to take over his palace and to get rid of him, what happens? The propaganda starts by flowing through the wives, the mothers, right? And the sisters. They start to affect their husbands, their sons, and their brothers. They start to say, if you leave us, if you go out and fight and you die, who's going to come and take care of us? Why are you going out and helping Muslim? Why are you going to go out and help Hussein? There's plenty of other people to do so. Why do you have to go out and do it? The army's big enough. You have to stay home and take care of me. And this sort of influence that many had over their husbands or sons or brothers or whomever took an effect, so much so that people started, as we know the history, they abandoned Muslim ibn Aqil as well. Right? And it's, there's many other stories as well. Now, of course, I don't want to paint just a negative picture, right? The idea of all this negative influence only exists because such a powerful positive influence exists in terms of the capacity of women as well. Right? The power of influence and persuasion is a powerful thing indeed. And it can either go one way or the other. Right? So sometimes when people see certain riwayat, which they think are very harsh, right? They're misogynistic, they're sexist. It doesn't make sense. Why would women be talked about like this? Well, when something is talked about this negatively in some occasions, you'll find the exact opposite in the positive way as well too. Right? This is a very typical example. Now, I don't know how many of you are not muqalladeen of Sayyid Sistani, hafidhullah, but how many of you, for example, play chess or understand the basic rules of chess and things like that, right? Obviously, the king, right, when somebody tries to capture the king, that's checkmate, and that's when the game ends, right? So the game ends when the king is about to be captured, right? That's how the game works. But anybody else knows that even though it's the king that ends the game, which is the actual most powerful piece in the game? What's the most powerful piece in chess? The queen, right? Even people who don't play chess, they know this. That even if, let's say, all your other pieces are okay, if somebody loses their queen, especially early on, it's as if they've almost lost the game in the beginning, right? And it's interesting how that piece has been designed like that, right? Whoever designed this game and changed it, it's been changed over time too. But that queen has this powerful ability in the game, but there's also a lot to lose too, right? There's a big risk when you put your queen out there as well. Right? It's an interesting metaphor for society too, that when individuals want to put their women out, empower them, get them out in society, put them out there, okay, it has some positive, there's some positive opportunities, but there's some risks with that as well too, right? There's obviously been this huge movement over the years, most of you know on social media, where many individuals were coming out, they had these hijab tutorial videos, and unfortunately, these makeup tutorial videos as well, right? Muhajjabat, right? Women who are observing hijab, Muslimas. It was encouraging individuals, young Muslim girls to wear and do all this. And everybody thought it was wonderful, right? Back in those very naive days of social media. Oh, this is great. Young Muslimas are being encouraged. And then what would happen? One individual, one of these Muslimas on social media would decide to remove her hijab, give her reasons, and then all those hundreds of thousands and millions of followers would follow suit and say, all right, we're going to lose our hijab too. Just from one individual with, a camera in their face. This is the kind of power that exists, unfortunately. So it can be taken positively, but there's also a big risk, and it can go negative as well. Let me share some of the positive riwayat that have been mentioned by the Ahlul Bayt. This one is from Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wassalam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. He's reported to have said, "Az-zawjatu as-salihah ahadul kasabain." That a righteous and a salih wife is one of the two greatest things that a person can obtain in their life, right? And it was so important that Imam Ali didn't even mention the second thing. His only focus was saying that, look, one of the two greatest things that you can obtain and gather in your life is having a righteous wife. Now, there's no riwayat that exists that mentions the same exact thing for a husband. You don't have that. There's no riwayat which says getting a great husband is good. Why? Because there's a power and influence that exists with the wife that may not necessarily exist with a father or a husband. Another hadith, this one comes from Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala. Reported to have said, ثَلَاثَةٌ فِيهِنَّ لِلْمُؤْمِنِ رَاحَةٌ. Right? There are three things which give this raha, this comfort, peace and tranquility to a mu'min, a believer. The first, دَارٌ حَالُهُ مِنَ النَّاسِ. A house, right, an abode that gives them privacy from other individuals. Right? Everybody knows, if you've ever had an apartment with thin walls, you know how restrictive and problematic it can be. It can be tough to deal with other people. You don't feel you have a sense of privacy, right? You hear other people's business, they hear your business. It's not great, right? Or even in the same house when you have thin walls. You don't want to always, hear things that are going on there. So when somebody has, and it's recommended in Islam to try to have a house which is a bit more spacious. One for privacy, and the second, which is mentioned in riwayat, it's so that a person can host individuals as well too, right? There's mustahab reasons. Not just get a big house for the sake of flaunting it and saying, I can buy a big house. That's not the idea. The idea is to use it to benefit other individuals. So that's the first thing. The second thing he mentions is what? وَامْرَأَةٌ صَالِحَةٌ وَاسِعَةٌ تُوَارِي عَوْرَتَهُ وَسُوءَتَهُ وَتُعِينَهُ عَلَى أَمْرِ الدُّنْيَا وَالْآخِرَةِ. The second thing which brings comfort to a mu'min is a salih, a righteous wife, right? Which is just like the other hadith from Imam Ali, but this one, Imam Sadiq adds a few other conditions and traits. It says, so a righteous wife who is modest, who conceals the flaws of their husband, and supports him in matters of the dunya and the akhirah. So again, the Imam is talking about what a good wife would entail. It's somebody who, again, they have that power of influence, which can go negatively, but this way it's a positive influence, right? When a husband is lucky enough to find a good wife who's she's helping assist him in the matters of this world and pushing him towards doing things for the akhirah that maybe he sometimes gets lazy about. Maybe she's the one who's a bit more spiritual at times, and when it's Fajr time, she has to go and wake him up. Or maybe he's busy doing work at home or doing something around the house, and it's Salat time, and she has to go give him the reminder. Right? There's a lot of reward and recommendation for this. Right? So this is what Imam Ali is talking about. And the other one too, I think the second quality is probably something very, very important nowadays, is the idea about concealing flaws. Right? One of the names of Allah that we know is Sattarul Uyub. Right? Allah is one who conceals defects. He hides those. So a good wife is manifesting those same qualities and names of Allah, right? To conceal and hide defects of individuals, primarily for her husband. What happens too much in this society, in the modern day, is that what do people do when they gather around, sometimes both husbands and wives, is they go and they rant and they start airing dirty laundry to other people. Whether it's to their family, right? Sometimes a husband or a wife will go complain to their own parents. Oh, do you know what they're doing to me? Do you know what they said to me? This is not something we should be doing, right? Or they go to their friends or a cousin or something like that and say, oh, this is what they said to me, this is what they did to me. We should be concealing these faults and always talking about the fada'il of our spouse, not bringing defects outside. Right? Now sometimes it's the case where you need advice. Well, there's a way to get advice without mentioning the default of somebody else, right? You don't have to always say that, oh, my husband's like this or my wife is like this. What should I do about that? You don't have to mention that. You can mention it in a very indirect way, right? It's not a good thing. I mean, for any person, but especially shouldn't be done for our spouses, right? And the final comfort that comes to a mu'min is what? وَبِنْتٌ أَوْ أُخْتٌ أَخْرَجَهَا مِنْ بَيْتِهِ بِمَوْتٍ أَوْ تَزْوِيجٍ. And the third thing which offers comfort and sukoon and peace and tranquility to a mu'min is having a daughter or a sister who has left their home either through death or through marriage, right? So again, there's a lot to talk about in this part of the end of the hadith, but I want to move on and try to finish this the tafsir for tonight. Let's move on to the last and final ayah of Surah Al-Falaq. If you can recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. وَمِن شَرِّ حَاسِدٍ إِذَا حَسَدٍ. And seeking refuge from the jealous person whenever they are jealous. Now the question also we asked last night is, why would Allah repeat himself like this? It's redundant, right? The jealous seeking protection from a jealous person when they're jealous. Why doesn't Allah just say, seek protection from a jealous person? Or why doesn't Allah say, seek refuge from jealousy? Why from a jealous person when they're jealous? Why? It's because of this. Some have argued that, well, if Allah doesn't say, وَمِن شَرِّ حَاسِدٍ إِذَا حَسَدٍ, then the whole rhyming scheme of the surah goes away too, right? Okay, that's one possibility, but Allah doesn't have to make things rhyme. He's not Dr. Seuss. It doesn't have to flow like that, right? Na'udhu billah. But okay, yes, there's a reason why it flows like that too. But most likely the other reason is because, and this is like a vital point for a lot of different akhlaqi issues that we see in Islam, is that there's a difference when it comes to Islam in terms of addressing feelings and actions. They're not the same thing. Feeling jealous is different and has a different ruling than acting jealous and expressing that jealousy. If we were not permitted to be jealous, then, if we're being honest, most of us would be doing haram like 24/7. Usually, for various reasons, people have a sense of jealousy, a feeling of jealousy, which comes out. And it seems almost like a reflex, subconscious. So if Allah took us to account for that, it would almost seem unfair. Of course, Allah is not unfair. That's why He doesn't do things like this. So anytime, and it's not just for jealousy, anytime, and I think you know what I mean by this, anytime a person has any sort of feeling, just a feeling itself, which could lead to haram, it's fine. That's not haram in and of itself. When the person expresses it somehow and acts upon it, that's when it becomes haram. So when it comes to, for example, physical attraction issues, right, whether it's the same sex or opposite sex, it's always the feeling that's the feeling is not a problem necessarily, right? People always ask, how could Allah create people like that? Like, okay, so He created them, but the feeling is not haram. It's the action that would be haram if the person engaged and acted upon it. There's a big difference there. So you cannot blame somebody and see it's reprehensible that they have these feelings because perhaps Allah did set them up with that trial and that difficulty in their life. Sure. But the action, that's something that's in their control, right? Like what it would be for anything else. So over here, what's being highlighted is the action of jealousy and how jealousy is performed. And this is also related to the discussion on nazar, on what we call the evil eye or ayn. So it's a big conversation and we don't have time to open up the whole thing. But can being jealous in and of itself, like extremely manifesting your jealousy and really just harboring that feeling in your mind or your heart, is that enough to actually affect other people? Right? That's what we think about in terms of the evil eye, right? Is that somebody just, they're so jealous of me, they know something good happened in my life, and if they see that, then something bad is going to happen to me, right? Or to that, my child, or my spouse, or my job, something like that. So there's a yes and no to this. It's a very detailed response, but I'll just give you the quick response. The idea, according to many of our ulama, is nazar or ayn or evil eye is basically an intense form of jealousy. Not the typical one that you and I might feel kind of day to day when we see something, right? Somebody sees you drive by these multi-million-dollar houses, you might feel a little jealous, oh, I wish I had that, right? Nothing wrong with that. You might see, right, out in the parking lot, and a community member has a very nice car, and yours is a nice, simple one. You might feel a little jealous, right? There's nothing there. It's a simple feeling, right? And you can get rid of it. But when somebody starts to harbor on that feeling, and they start to think about it, they start to make judgments about the individuals, like, oh, why aren't they spending their money like this? Or why don't I have it? Why did Allah give it to them? And they start going on and on with this. And they literally almost, just to kind of give a picture to it, it's as if they're literally, we call it the evil eye, but kind of imagine, superheroes or supervillains who can shoot lasers out of their eyes. That's kind of what's happening here. Is you're literally trying to shoot this kind of negative energy at somebody with this intense form of jealousy. That's what's happening here. And yes, for certain individuals who take it to an intense level, it does have an effect on other people. It can have that effect. So we do have to be careful. So we shouldn't say that, just because somebody's jealous, there's no big deal. No, it is a problem if somebody has an intense form of jealousy, though not every single thing that happens bad in our life, as we mentioned a few nights ago, we can attribute to evil eye. Oh, somebody did, it's the evil eye, it's nothing. No, usually it's not the case. Right? There's a discussion in Islamic metaphysics about how something like this happens. So it's individuals who have a lot more control or ability over their soul. It's not the average person. It's somebody who really can exert a lot of influence out in the real world. Right? Okay. Let's move on to the next discussion. If you can recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So what's the original meaning of hasad? So hasad originally meant when somebody they rubbed any sort of object on another object in order to scratch something out or to kind of quickly remove it. Right? That was the original meaning. Then over time, it took this meaning of what we call jealousy, right, or envy, which is what? Is that when we wish or we hope for something that somebody has, we want that to be destroyed. We don't want them to have it anymore. That's the definition of jealousy and envy and hasad. Somebody has a nice car, like, I don't think that they should have that. I wish they didn't have that. They have a nice house, I don't think that they should have that. They have beauty, I don't think they should have that. All right? They have a big family, I don't want them to have that. It's this feeling that I wish Allah, you're literally making a negative dua. I wish Allah would remove it from them. That's what is not akhlaqan, it's not a good trait to have, to constantly pester on that thought and have that thought of, I don't want that individual to have it, right? There's a hadith from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, which speaks to how powerful this jealousy can get if somebody harbors on it too much. He says, كَادَ الْحَسَدْ أَن يَسْبِقْ الْقَدْرِ. He says, it's almost as if hasad and jealousy can overtake somebody's destiny, their qadr. Things that have been outlined for us in terms of risk or many other things, it's, Rasulullah is trying to advise us and warn us that jealousy can be so powerful that it can affect people's, their qadr, the things that have been destined for them to happen as well too. It's a very, very evil trait that we have to be careful of. Now, not every type of jealousy is evil and it's bad. There's also a positive type of jealousy and envy as well, which in Arabic is known as ghibta, which many of you have heard of before too. So what's the difference between hasad and ghibta? We said hasad is when I see something, or see somebody and I'm like, I don't want them to have it, right? Get rid of it. Ghibta is saying they have something, I recognize that value or the beauty or the worth, and you know what, Allah, I want you to preserve it for them. In fact, increase it for them, and I would also like it too. So the difference then is that in jealousy or hasad, it's that they don't deserve to have it, I deserve to have it, right? So get rid of it for them and give it to me. Like swap it out pretty much is what you're saying. With ghibta, you're saying, no, keep it for them. Let them have it. They deserve it. Allah, you know best that they deserve it. In fact, give them more. I pray that they get more. And Allah, it would be great if I could have it too, right? So it's more focused on, it's like two types of du'as then. It's a dua of protection and increase for that individual. And then you're also asking for your own self as well too. Whereas hasad is just you're only making a positive dua for yourself and then a negative dua for somebody else, right? From Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam, he's reported to have said, Inna al-mu'min yaghbut wa la yahsud. A mu'min will engage in ghibta. Like this is good for you to do as a mu'min. Look at things which are good and beautiful, and be encouraged to go after it. Pray for those individuals and pray for yourself to have it. Wa la yahsud, but don't have hasad. Don't pray for things to get removed from other individuals, right? Munafiq does the other thing. Yahsud wa la yaghbut. A munafiq will say, no, I'm going to engage in hasad, right? I don't want them to have it. And they don't ever want something to be preserved for other individuals. So inshallah, we pray that we can be proper mu'mineen and not munafiqeen, inshallah ta'ala. There's a few riwayat on this subject as well. And then we want to talk about the treatment. Since we're out of time, I think we'll probably have to leave this for Saturday. Since tomorrow night, we'll be celebrating the birth anniversary of our second Imam, Imam Hasan ibn Ali, alayhi salatu wassalam. We'll wait till Saturday to conclude this discussion. And then on the occasion of the birth of the Imam tomorrow, then we will have a separate topic addressed to that. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad, wa ala ahla baytihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin.